In the most forgotten corner of the nursing home, the old man everyone had given up on had actually saved thousands of lives. But now he was being left to die alone. And there was only one person who noticed. A night shift caregiver. 4 in the morning. The fluorescent light at the end of the hallway was flickering again. Emily Carter had stopped noticing it months ago. She had reported it months ago. And months had passed with no one coming to fix it. But tonight, that trembling light seemed to be trying to tell her something, as if the corridor itself already knew that this night would be different from all the others. The foam soles of her shoes made quiet squeaking sounds on the linoleum floor as she went over the night checklist in her hand one more time. With the tip of her pen, she placed a small tick next to each line. This ritual gave her something, being part of a system, being part of something that could be counted, being able to reduce everything she saw during an 8-hour shift to paper. Otherwise, how would a person carry all of it? How would anyone carry all of it? Room 1, Mr. Morrison, sleeping. Room 2, Mrs. Delacroix, sleeping. Room 3, Mr. and Mrs. Fujimoto, sleeping. She reached the end of the corridor, stopped. Room 7. Light was seeping under the door. Emily frowned slightly. She knew the resident of this room fell asleep every night at 2. The nursing home records showed it. His medication ensured it. His routine demanded it. But tonight, that thin line of light slipping under the door was telling her something was different. It was different. But she had no idea just how different. She knocked. No answer. Once more. Still silence. She pushed the door open slowly, and what she saw rooted her to the spot. 83-year-old Edward Harlan was sitting by the window. His wheelchair was turned directly toward the glass. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap, his eyes fixed outside. Even though nothing was visible in the darkness, he was looking at years past, maybe decades past, and he was crying, silently, his shoulders trembling. The tears running down his cheeks disappeared into the deep creases of his neck. He made no sound. Emily knew this kind of crying by now. This kind of crying took years of practice, to not let anyone hear you, even when someone was nearby. Otherwise, you burdened others. Otherwise, you looked weak. Otherwise, questions came and you had to answer them. And sometimes there were no words for the answers. Emily froze for a moment in the doorway. She had seen this before. It was an unavoidable part of working in a nursing home. The elderly crying in the night, carrying the weight of memories, losses, loneliness in the dark, carrying things that had no names anymore. But this man, Edward Harlan, was different somehow. She could feel it, the way you feel a shift in temperature before a storm. He had been in this room for 4 months and Emily had crossed paths with him hundreds of times. At meals, in the garden, during physio session. He almost never spoke. The staff would say Alzheimer's, but Emily had never been quite sure about that, because in Edward Harlan's eyes, those pale blue eyes, something still burned. They were not cloudy, they were not empty, they were not the eyes of a man who had lost himself. Vaccine, sometimes he looked so sharply at something that Emily had the distinct sense he was seeing everything, and had simply chosen to say nothing. Those were not the eyes of a man who had forgotten, but there were things she did not know yet. "Mr. Harlan," Emily whispered, stepping into the room. "Are you all right?" The man did not turn his head. Emily moved slowly closer, crouched down, and brought herself to the man's eye level. She laid her hand gently over the old man's hand. The hands were cold. He had been sitting like that for a long time. His fingers were locked together so tightly that the knuckles had gone pale, like gripping something. Something invisible, something only he could feel. "I'm here," said Emily. She said nothing else. Sometimes that was all that was needed. Someone had come. They were there, they were not leaving. It had taken her 2 years to learn this simple truth. For 2 years she had said the wrong things. Everything will be okay. You'll feel better soon. Be strong." The words had meant well, but they had filled the air between her and the person in front of her with noise, when what was needed was silence. Then one day an elderly woman named Mrs. Keene had told her, "Child, it's enough that you're here. You don't need to say anything at all." She had never forgotten those words. Edward Harlan turned his head slowly. His eyes moved across Emily's face, as if searching for something. What was he looking for? Fear? Pity? Judgment? She hoped he found none of those things. Then he spoke the longest sentence she had heard from him in months. "How many people died today?" he asked. His voice was hoarse, but the words were clear. They did not tremble, as if he had practiced saying this question for years, as if this question had been spoken inside him many times over, weighed carefully, before it was finally allowed to reach his lip. Emily pulled back slightly in surprise. "Pardon me?" "In this corridor," said the man, tilting his head very slightly toward the hallway. "Today." "How many?" Emily swallowed. "No one," she said slowly. "Everyone is fine." The man turned back to the window. He mumbled something, so quietly that Emily caught only the last two words. "This time." But the truly shocking thing, the thing that would not leave Emily's mind for the rest of that night, was those two words. This time. As if there had been other times. As if this man kept a running count somewhere deep inside. How many had been saved, how many had slipped away. As if death was not an abstract, unspeakable concept to him, but something he had learned to look at directly. Something countable. Something that had a number. Most people spent their whole lives avoiding that number. This man had been counting it. Emily spent the rest of her shift with those words. When she handed over to assistant nurse Jenna at 6 in the morning, her steps had become mechanical. Her hands were going through the motions, but her mind was still inside room 7. Jenna was saying something. A note about the shift. A reminder about someone's medication. But the sounds reached Emily as if filtered through cotton, muffled and distant. Before leaving, she did something she had not planned. She went to the old wooden cabinet in the staff room. She pulled open the bottom drawer. The thin blue files kept for every resident admitted to the nursing home were lined up in a neat row. Full name, age, medical history, contact information, emergency contacts. Emily had opened these files hundreds of times over 4 years. They were routine. Paper and ink. A few pages trying to hold a whole life. She pulled out the file that read Harlan, Edward J. She opened it, and what she read inside made her hands begin to shake. The first page was standard: name, date of birth, diagnosis, Alzheimer's stage 2, early to moderate. No known allergies, heart medication, blood pressure medication, sleep regulator. The next 2 pages were medical notes, last examination dates, medication dosages, full risk assessment. All of it familiar, all of it routine. But the 4th page was different. The 4th page had a box that read previous occupation, a standard field. Most residents had things like retired schoolteacher, homemaker, or farmer written there, in ordinary handwriting. But in Edward Harlan's file, whoever had filled it out had written a small, dense paragraph, as if the space of a single line was simply not enough to contain what needed to be said. Chief Trauma Surgeon, U.S. Army, Vietnam/Gulf War/Afghanistan. Retired, civilian service, Johns Hopkins University Hospital. Founding Director of Neurology Department, 1989 to 2014. Specialization, battlefield trauma, brain surgery, skull fractures. Emily put the file down on the table, picked it up, read it again. Read it one more time, more slowly. Then she reached for her phone and typed the name into a search engine. Edward J. Harlan, surgeon. The screen filled up immediately. This was the moment everything changed. Results chased one another down the page. Academic papers, conference presentations, award ceremonies, university websites with words like legend and pioneer appearing in the very first lines of his biography. And at the bottom, a small thumbnail image that expanded when tapped. A magazine cover from 1987. A young man, standing tall, a surgical gown, the cap still on his head, his gloved hands not yet removed. He was looking directly into the camera. He was smiling. The headline read, "The Man Who Saves the Unsavable, Dr. Edward Harlan and the 10,000 Lives." 10,000. 10,000. Emily turned that number over in her mind. 10,000 people. 10,000 brains. 10,000 war wounds. 10,000 moments when someone had looked at a body and said, "This one cannot be saved." And this man had said no. 10,000 Tommies. She did not know who Tommy was yet, but she would. She opened one of the academic articles, published in a medical journal in 1995. Title, Battlefield Applications of a New Brain Surgery Technique. Author, Dr. Edward J. Harlan. She read the abstract. Most of it she did not understand. The medical terminology, the Latin, the measurements, but one sentence stood out from the rest with perfect clarity. This technique is currently applied as standard protocol in military hospitals in more than 40 countries worldwide. 40 countries. Standard protocol. Emily put her phone down on the table. She looked at the window. She looked at the corridor. Room 7's door was still closed at the far end of the hall, and she began to cry. In the staff room at 6 in the morning, alone, with no one else around. She had been doing this job for 4 years, and she could not have counted how many times she had cried in this building. But this was different. This was not the quiet grief of witnessing someone's last breath. This was something sharper. This was anger crying. This was injustice crying. This was the kind of crying that comes when you cannot find an answer to the question, how is this possible? How is any of this possible? That morning, she could not make herself go home. She should have gone home. The 8-hour shift was over, her feet ached, her back was tight, her eyes burned. But she poured herself a cup of coffee from the machine in the cafeteria and sat down at one of the plastic tables. The chair creaked under her weight. The fluorescent light here was dim, like everywhere else in this building. She sat anyway, she put the file in front of her. She went through the pages again, one by one. A second reading, much slower this time, each word given its full weight. The third page had the emergency contact section. 2 names were written there. First, Richard Harlan, son, attorney, Chicago, Illinois. Second, Margaret Harlan Pierce, daughter, engineer, Boston, Massachusetts. Emily ran her fingertips slowly over the phone numbers. Date of last visit, 14 months ago. 14 months. Emily picked up her pen. She wrote in the margin of her own notepad, 14 months. Then she looked at it. Then she crossed it out. That was not the kind of thing that belonged in the margin of a notepad. That belonged somewhere more permanent. Somewhere it could not simply be crossed out. This man, the man who had saved 10,000 people, had not been visited by a single member of his family in 14 months. Wait. Do not miss this detail. At the very bottom of the file, stuck to the back of the last page, was a small yellow sticky note. It was written in the handwriting of nursing home manager Diane Marsh. The date on it was 6 months ago. Family has been contacted multiple times regarding visit planning. No response received. Patient condition stable. Social isolation note added. Legal power of attorney, Richard Harlan. Social isolation note. That was the official term. That was the language the records used for a human being. Social isolation note. Emily sat in the cafeteria for another hour after that. Her coffee went cold on the table in front of her. She did not drink it. She watched the garden through the window. The first pale light of morning was beginning to fall on the grass, in long, soft strips. Birds had started somewhere outside. The day was beginning. The world kept turning, the way it always did, without asking permission or offering apologies. And somewhere at the far end of that corridor, Edward Harlan was sitting by his window, looking out at that same morning light. the way he had every morning for 40 years, counting. The way the people he had kept alive counted too. One more sunrise, one more day, one more chance to see something worth seeing. The following night, Emily arrived early. Her shift started at 9, but she was there at 8. While changing into her uniform in the staff room, she looked at the small bag she had brought. She had stopped at the grocery store on the way. Nothing expensive. A thermos of cinnamon tea, 2 shortbread cookies wrapped in paper, a small gesture. The kind of gesture that costs almost nothing and means almost everything. She knocked on the door of room 7. "Come in," said a voice from inside. Not a groggy voice. Not a voice pulled back from the edge of sleep. He was awake, fully awake, as if he had been sitting there waiting, though of course that could not be true. Emily opened the door. The man was at the window again, but tonight the light was on and he was holding an old book in his lap. The cover was worn smooth, the corners soft and curled from years of being held. He looked up when she entered. "I didn't want to disturb you," said Emily. Last night stayed with me." The man closed his book. He removed his glasses and set them on the bedside table. He looked at Emily with an expression she had not seen on him before. Thoughtful, careful, like someone deciding whether a door is safe to open. "Sit down," he said. It was not a command. It was an invitation. There is a difference, and Emily heard it clearly. She sat. She poured the tea into 2 cups from the thermos and handed one across. He looked at it for a moment. Then he took it. The cookie she set on the edge of the bedside table. He did not take it, but he did not refuse it either. A silence settled between them. Outside, the wind was moving through the trees. Somewhere far off, the thin wail of an ambulance siren rose and faded. Emily had learned to tell the difference. That one was heading toward the hospital down on the main road, not toward this building. Small distinctions that became second nature after enough time. Then Edward Harlan began to speak. And that night, Emily Carter listened to the heaviest, most beautiful, most devastating story she had ever heard in her life. It was 1968, Vietnam, the Mekong Delta. Edward was 28 years old. He had graduated from medical school 3 years earlier. His surgical specialization was still underway. The training was ongoing in Boston, in a clean and well-lit hospital, under the careful supervision of experienced professors. He had a future plan. He had a timeline. Then the letter came, an army letter, and he went. Because in those years, going and not going were not equally available options for a young man of his background. "I performed my first surgery by flashlight," said the man. He took a slow sip of his tea. His voice was steady and even, as if the weight of what he was describing had been carried so long it had become simply the way things were. But his eyes were somewhere else entirely. His eyes were still in 1968. There was no assistant. The anesthesia machine had malfunctioned. The generator cut out twice while I was working. Both times I stopped. Both times I waited in the dark. A soldier held a flashlight above the table with both hands, and I continued. Emily had stopped breathing without realizing it. "The patient?" she whispered. "Tommy," said the man. "Tommy Briggs, 22 years old, from Iowa. A piece of shrapnel had entered through his left temple and traveled into the brain membrane. By the book, by every standard of the time, he could not be saved. The damage was too extensive, the conditions too poor, the surgeon too young and too inexperienced. But you saved him." "I saved him," said the man. A pause. He looked down at his cup. 20 years later, he wrote me a letter. He was farming in Iowa. He had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. At the end of the letter, in the last paragraph, he had written these words: "I owe you something, but I never knew what to give. Just know this. Every morning when I see the sun, I think of you." The room went quiet. Emily's eyes had filled. She felt them spilling over and could not stop them. "Every morning when he sees the sun," she repeated quietly. I thought of Tommy every morning when I saw the sun too, said the man. And after that letter, I thought of everyone. Every person I had ever operated on. Every morning I would go to whatever window was nearest. I would look at the light, and I would count. How many people are alive today who might not have been? How many people opened their eyes this morning? How many people sat across a table from their children? Emily understood. She finally understood. That is why you were at the window last night, she said. The man lowered his head very slightly. He did not confirm it with words, but silence, at the right moment, is its own kind of answer. They talked for 2 hours that night. Edward Harlan told her things that went far beyond the war. He talked about returning to Boston in 1971 and resuming his training as if the last 3 years had been a strange dream he was trying to shake off. He talked about the founding of the neurology department at Johns Hopkins in 1989, the 18-month process of convincing the board, the early mornings spent writing grant applications by hand, the colleagues who told him it would never be approved. He talked about the brain surgery technique he had spent nearly a decade developing and refining, how many times it had failed, how many times he had gone back to his notes at 4 in the morning, how many times he had been certain it would never work, and how many times that certainty had turned out to be wrong. "What is the technique called?" asked Emily. "The Harlan Protocol," said the man. Then, almost to himself, very quietly, "I did not name it that. My students named it. I was simply looking for a method that worked." "How many surgeries in total?" Emily asked. "If you know." The man thought for a moment, genuinely. "I never kept count myself," he said, "but one of my doctoral students included a figure in their dissertation. Somewhere just over 12,000. 12,000. Emily pressed her hand over her mouth. "You opened 12,000 people's heads," she whispered. The man laughed. It was a small laugh, quiet and dry, but it was real. And it was the first time Emily had seen it. After all those months of corridors and meal trays and brief, careful nods. "I opened them," he said, "and closed them." The closing was always the more important part. Emily laughed too, a small, wet laugh. But something underneath it was breaking. The question she could not ask. How many nights did you not sleep to be able to close 12,000? Settled into her chest and did not leave. It was nearly 11. Emily's rounds were half finished. She knew she needed to go. "Your family," she said at last. The word sat strangely in her mouth. She took her time finding the question. Why aren't they here?" Edward Harlan set his cup down carefully on the table beside him. A long silence followed. Outside, the wind shifted. A branch tapped once against the window pane. Then stillness. "Richard became a lawyer," he said. "Margaret an engineer. Both of them successful by every measure. Both of them put through school by me. Working. Night shifts, weekends, extra clinic shifts whenever they were offered. Summer teaching. I paid their tuition from my own salary year by year." He stopped. He turned his cup slowly between his palms. "But I was not home. For years and years, I was not home." Emily waited. "One day Richard called me," the man continued. His voice shifted, just barely. The smallest tremor, like a crack so fine you could only see it if you were looking directly at the right spot. He said, "Dad, you took better care of your hospital than you took of your family. Now let someone take care of you. And they brought me here." He paused. Margaret came too that day. Both of them came. They were kind about it. They packed my things themselves. The room held its breath. "Are you angry?" asked Emily. The man raised his head, his eyes found hers and stayed there. "They are right," he said. "I was not home. That is true, even on the days when I was physically present. I was somewhere else. At the dinner table thinking about the morning's procedure. On birthdays, waiting for a phone that might ring with something urgent. 10 more minutes, I always told myself. 10 more minutes, and then I will be present. And the 10 minutes never ended. He stopped again. They are right. 3 words. But it was not 3 words. It was a confession that had been waiting decades for someone to receive it. And in receiving it, Emily Carter understood something she had not understood before. How a person can serve as their own harshest judge. How a sentence can be delivered quietly and carried without drama for the rest of a life. How the deepest guilt becomes, in time, simply the way things are. After that night, things changed. Slowly, without announcement. No decision was made, no boundary crossed. Things simply shifted the way light shifts when clouds move, and you only notice it after it has already happened. Emily began stopping at room 7 every night, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for half an hour, sometimes only to say goodnight and close the door again. But the man knew she had been there, and Emily knew that he knew. And in that small, unspoken acknowledgement, something had been built that neither of them had words for. By the end of the 3rd week, something else had shifted too. Edward Harlan had begun eating in the common cafeteria, not in his room alone, but at the long table with the other residents. He did not say much, but he was present. He ate what was put in front of him. Once in a while, he raised his head when Mrs. Delacroix said something. And once, just once, Emily saw the edge of his mouth curl upward. Jenna noticed, of course. "You spend a lot of time at that room," she said one morning, raising both eyebrows. "Is the old man sweet on you or something?" Emily smiled. "That man is a legend," she said. Jenna shrugged. "Alzheimer's patient." "An Alzheimer's patient," said Emily slowly, "who opened and closed 12,000 people's skulls. 12,000. How many people have any of us done that much for?" Jenna said nothing. But from that day forward, she slowed her step whenever she passed room 7. Sometimes she stopped. Sometimes she smiled at the door in a way that had no obvious explanation and needed none. 3 weeks later, on a Friday evening, receptionist Marcos stopped Emily before she could even reach the corridor. "Room 7 has a visitor," he said. His voice had a careful quality to it. "His son." Emily felt her feet stop. "Richard Harlan?" "Yes." Marcos looked at his desk. He spoke with management first, then went to the room. He paused, then added, "He had a briefcase with him." Emily's steps quickened as she moved down the corridor. She told herself there was no reason to hurry. This was the man's father. This was a visit. This was exactly the right thing to happen. But something in her stomach had tightened into a fist and would not release. As she passed room 7, she heard voices from inside. She stopped. What she had seen and heard so far was nothing. This was where it truly began. Richard Harlan's voice came through the door, smooth, controlled, the voice of a man who argued for a living. But underneath it, something was simmering, something that had been held in check for a very long time and was growing tired of being held. "We have to sell it, Dad. Margaret and I are in agreement. The house is sitting empty, we're paying property tax on it every month. You have care fees here on top of that. It doesn't make financial sense to keep holding on to it." And then Edward Harlan's voice. Quiet, unhurried, immovable. "The house must not be sold." "Dad, be reasonable. What would you possibly do with a house you can't go back to? You go to the garden here. You walk the hall. That house is standing empty. It is your mother's house." Short, 4 words. The kind of sentence that does not invite a response. "Mother died 20 years ago," said Richard. His voice had softened slightly, but only slightly. "I know that. You know that. But a house is a house, Dad. It's a property. We can't let emotion." "When I was there," said Edward Harlan, "your mother used to look at me from that window." He stopped. "When Margaret was born, it was snowing. I went out into the garden and stood in the snow. Your mother looked down from the upstairs window. She smiled at me." He stopped again. "That window is that smile. For me. I cannot sell that window." A silence fell behind the door, so complete that Emily could hear the fluorescent light buzzing above her head. "We will talk about this another time," said Richard. Footsteps. The door opened. Richard Harlan stepped into the corridor and nearly walked into Emily. He was in his early 50s, in a well-cut suit with the same silver-grey hair as his father, though on him it looked like something managed rather than something lived. He stopped. He looked at her. "Are you a nurse?" he asked. "Care staff," said Emily. "Emily Carter." He gave a small nod. Then he walked away with firm, purposeful steps, and he did not look back. Emily looked at the door of room 7. She went in. Edward Harlan was at the window again. The light was off. Only the faint yellow glow of the parking lot filtered through the glass and lay in soft shapes across the floor. "Did you hear?" the man asked. Emily did not need to answer. "You heard everything," he said. "The walls are thin in this building." Emily pulled the chair close and sat down. She had not brought anything tonight. No tea, no cookies, just herself. "The house should not be sold," said Emily. Then she heard her own words and caught herself. "That's not my place. I'm sorry, I know what you meant," said the man. Silence. "If I lose that window," said Edward Harlan very quietly, "I lose Barbara." Emily Carter had never wanted to cry so badly in her life, but she did not. She held it, because the fear in the man's eyes, that particular naked fear of losing the last fragile thing that kept someone present, that fear needed a witness, not a partner in grief. "You won't lose her," said Emily. "She's in here." She touched her own chest very gently. "The window is just wood and glass. The smile is yours. It always was." The man looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to the window, and Emily Carter watched as the line of his shoulders, very slowly, dropped just a fraction of an inch. The weight had not left him, but some small part of it had been transferred, and that was enough. That was something. 2 days later, Emily was called to Diane Marsh's office. The manager was seated behind her desk with her hands clasped on the surface, and her expression carefully arranged into something neutral. Emily had seen that expression before. It was the expression of someone about to say something they themselves did not fully believe in. "Sit down, Emily." Emily sat. Her stomach had already told her what was coming. "The Harlan family has submitted a complaint," said Diane. She looked at the paper in front of her. "Richard Harlan believes his father has been emotionally influenced by a member of care staff. The complaint cites irregular visits, extended time spent in the residence room, and suspected interference with family decisions." Emily's hands tightened in her lap. I know what you were doing," said Diane. Her voice had dropped. She checked the office door with a glance, almost involuntarily. "Emily, I know exactly what you were doing, and I know why. You have been here for 4 years, and I know how you work. But I need you to understand something. This family has lawyers, and this facility operates on the fees that family pays every month." A silence that felt like a room filling with water. "What are you asking me to do?" said Emily. "Keep your distance from room 7, said Diane. The words seemed to cost her something. Routine checks, medication administration, meal delivery. Nothing beyond that. No extended stays. Emily stood up. She did not thank her manager. She walked to the door. "Emily," said Diane. Emily stopped but did not turn around. "Some things in this world are deeply unfair," said Diane. "This is one of them. But if this facility closes, every resident in this building is on the street, including him." Emily left without answering. She spent the rest of that shift in something close to a mechanical state. She followed the routine. She completed the rounds, she delivered the right medication in the right doses to the right rooms, ticked every box, filled in every form, everything where it belonged, everything accounted for. She passed the door of room 7 3 times that night. Each time she stopped. Each time she kept walking. At 6 in the morning, finishing the last checklist, she saw the faint line of light under the door. Routine check, she told herself. This falls within routine. She knocked. "Come in." She went in. Edward Harlan was writing at his desk with an old fountain pen. Heavy, black, the kind of pen that left a mark you could feel on the back of the page. "Mr. Harlan. Everything all right?" The man set the pen down. He looked at her. "Did my CE file a complaint about you?" he asked. Emily went still. "Richard," said the man. "I know him well. I know exactly how he operates. He filed a complaint. I am certain of it. I can see it in the way you're standing right now." Emily had no answer. The man picked up his pen again. "You are not obligated to stay," he said simply. "I understand if you cannot." Emily stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she crossed the room and sat down. She pulled the thermos from her bag and opened the cap. "You never finished the story from the Gulf War," she said. "You stopped at the moment the bomb hit the tent." The man's pen went still. Something moved across his face. Something she did not have a precise name for. And he continued telling the story. Weeks passed. Emily heard nothing more about the complaint. Whether Diane had intervened, whether Richard Harlan had decided it was not worth pursuing, whether it had simply been forgotten, she did not know. And she tried not to think about it too much. Some things are better left in the dark where they cannot be worried into growing larger. What she knew was this. Every night she came to her shift, and there was light under the door of room 7. And the man inside was awake, and he was waiting. One Wednesday afternoon, Emily was crossing the garden when she saw him. Edward Harlan, in his wheelchair, which he had driven himself to the window facing south. His eyes were closed. His face was turned directly into the sun. On his lips, barely visible, the most restrained and private of expressions, was something that might, in another light, have been called a smile. He was thinking about Tommy. Emily was certain of it. And perhaps about Barbara. About Barbara, smiling from a snowy window long ago. Emily walked past without stopping. He had not seen her. Or perhaps he had, and had chosen, this once, to simply be alone with the sun. Either way, it was fine. Either way, it was exactly as it should be. 3 months later. On a Tuesday morning, Emily arrived for her shift, and Marcos's face told her before his words could. "What happened?" she said. She had already stopped walking. 4 years of this work, and you learn to read disaster in the set of a person's jaw. Marcos did not answer. Emily ran. She tried to walk, but it became a run almost immediately. Her shoes squeaked hard on the linoleum. Room 7's door was standing open. The room was empty. The bed had been made. The wheelchair stood in the corner. The window was there, with its view of the parking lot and the pale morning sky. But there was no one in front of it. There was no one in the room at all. Emily ran back, to reception, to the nurse's station, then to Diane's office. "Mr. Harlan," she said, out of breath. "Where is he?" Diane rose from her chair. The expression on her face had no ambiguity in it. "Emily, where is he?" "This morning," said Diane slowly. "A cardiac event." The ambulance responded quickly. They took him to the hospital, but... She stopped. Emily waited. "Before he was taken," said Diane, and there was something strange and careful in her voice now. "There was an envelope on his desk. Your name was written on it. He had given it to reception himself the night before, as if he knew." Emily opened the envelope in the corridor. She could not sit. She stood where she was and opened it. Inside were 2 things. The first was a folded piece of paper, written with the heavy black fountain pen, in the familiar handwriting, but more trembling than she remembered it. Written with effort, perhaps written by hands that had already begun, in the long hours of the night, to slow down. "Emily, your work is like mine. We both open and close doors. I open heads, you open hearts. The difference is that you have learned to keep the doors open. That is not a small thing. That is everything. E.H. The second was a small photograph, black and white, dated 1968, Vietnam, a field surgery tent. A young man, 28 years old, in a gown with a cap on his head and an instrument in his hand, looking directly at the camera, smiling. And in that smile, Emily Carter saw the weight and the lightness of 12,000 lives at once. The weight. Because every one of those 12,000 had been a person on a table, a person who could not save themselves, a person entirely dependent on the steadiness of those two hands. The lightness. Because every single one of them had lived. Tommy, in Iowa, was seeing the sun this morning. Edward Harlan was leaving. But the young man in the photograph, that 28-year-old, exhausted, determined, quietly smiling young man, was not going anywhere at all. Edward Harlan passed away at the hospital that afternoon. Richard was there. Margaret was there too. Both of them had come. By plane. In a hurry. Late. But they had come. Emily learned the details from Marcos that evening. Richard had called. His father was gone. It was peaceful, he had said. He did not suffer. Emily heard this while standing inside room 7, looking at the empty bed. She had come in without meaning to. Her feet had simply brought her there. She stood in front of the window. The parking lot light had not come on yet. It was afternoon and the sun was still up, low and golden, hitting the glass at an angle. In Iowa, Tommy was looking at that same sun. And Edward Harlan, for the first time in a very long life of being responsible for other people's survival, had earned the right to leave with it. A month later, a package arrived for Emily at the nursing home. Sender, Richard Harlan, Chicago, Illinois. Inside the box was a book. Worn, its corners soft, its cover faded to a pale color that might once have been blue or green. The book Edward Harlan had read every night in room 7, that she had seen but never asked about. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, and a handwritten note. Miss Carter, I had not understood how much my father valued your presence. I understand now. He read this book every single night for decades, but in the last few months of his time here, he had left it sitting on his desk instead. Whether it was because he no longer needed it, or because he had found something that made it unnecessary, I cannot say. Perhaps both. Both would be a beautiful thing. R.H. Emily opened the book. On the inside of the front cover, in old ink, in handwriting she recognized immediately. When a person believes they are saving others, it is in fact they themselves who are being saved. Emily closed the book. She stepped out into the corridor. She walked. Her foam soles made their quiet sound against the linoleum. The fluorescent light at the end of the hall was still flickering. Still. No one had come to fix it. She stopped in front of room 7. The door was closed. Someone new would be arriving soon. Tomorrow, perhaps, or the day after. Another name in another blue file. Another life that had been folded small and handed to this building for safekeeping. Another world behind a numbered door. Emily Carter stood there for a moment, just stood, and she thought, behind every door in this corridor, there is a world. And opening those doors, that is my job.